Good evening, everyone. I'm Aygerim. Thanks for joining the Bishkek American Spaces virtual program. Today is the World Tuberculosis Day, and we invited Brian Holler, Senior Public Health Advisor at USAID Kyrgyz Republic. Hi, Brian.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you? Nice to see you.
Thank you. Great to see you too. And thank you, everyone, for joining the broadcast as well.
Yeah. Let me introduce you. Brian Holler works to support TB and HIV team here in Kyrgyzstan to create community-driven interventions and evidence-based health program. Brian has over 10 years of experience in the public health sector and particularly interested in intersections of infectious disease and behavioral health. He received his Master of Public Health from Tulane University. So it's great to have you, Brian. Thank you for taking the time to do this very important presentation for us. Dear friends, as always, if you are watching us, please ask your questions to our guest speaker, Brian Holler, about this topic and about USAID programs to fight against tuberculosis. Okay, Brian, I'm giving the floor to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Just bear with me 1 second while I share my screen here. So you do not have to look at me the entire time. Okay. And so
how are you?
I'm sorry?
I'm saying, how's the weather in your area?
Oh, it's rainy today, but the weather's really nice. It's about 20 centigrade, so no complaints on my side. So thank you, everyone, again for joining us. Today is World TB Day, which is a WHO day that was organized to bring awareness to tuberculosis, a international disease that affects millions of people worldwide. What I'd like to do today is share this presentation with you that gives a little bit of background on tuberculosis and finally talks a little bit about what USAID and the US government is doing in the Kyrgyz Republic to assist the Ministry of Health and some local organizations in fighting TB. So, first off, what is tuberculosis? Tuberculosis is a disease that lives in someone's body when they are infected and is almost always spread through the air. I know that most people will probably be more familiar with this now because much like COVID-19, the method of transmission or the way someone spreads it is very similar. So TB germs are often found in an infected person's lungs, and when they cough or sneeze, they can spread it to other individuals. And it's only when you have active TB, which we'll get into in a little bit, that you can spread it to someone else. So a little history of tuberculosis is tuberculosis has unfortunately affected people throughout history for many, many centuries. There are records going back to the Middle Ages of people having suffering from symptoms of tuberculosis. And it was in 1882 that a German scientist actually identified using a microscope the disease. But then it was almost 50 years until a treatment for tuberculosis was discovered. There was an American scientist who found that one antibiotic could help treat and prevent tuberculosis. But until then, most people, when they had it, if they could afford it, would go live in a sort of a fancy hotel for other people with TB, a sanatorium, and they would, eat healthy foods, experience fresh air, But most people couldn't afford it and had to suffer from it at home. And unfortunately, before antibiotics, TB was kind of a slow death sentence. So how are TB germs spread? As we said, they're passed through the air. To get TB, one usually needs to breathe in the infected air. This can usually happen between individuals who work together, live together, play together. And the amount of time, sort of the environment, how cold it is, how hot it is, can affect whether or not people get sick. And the good news is that I would venture to say that most everybody has been exposed to tuberculosis at some point in their life, but most people, their bodies are healthy enough to fight it off. It's just, unfortunately, sometimes if someone gets a bad strain of tuberculosis, gets exposed to it, or if they are suffering from another illness, or are not properly rested, not properly fed, maybe they have another disease, that they are more susceptible, meaning they're more likely to get TB. So how are TB germs not spread? So these are some common misconceptions around tuberculosis. So through quick casual contact, like walking by someone, when you're at the bazaar, standing next to somebody, talking to someone, you're not going to get TB that way. By sharing utensils or food. This is a misconception both about COVID and about TB. You can have someone, even who has TB and doesn't know it, cook a full meal for you, and you would never be at risk of getting it. And sharing cigarettes or drink containers, exchanging saliva, so kissing or other bodily fluids, by shaking hands, or by using public telephones or sharing your mobile with friends. So it really takes a sort of extended amount of time sharing air that's breathed between the two of you for someone to get it. And I'm going to go off of the presentation that I've adapted here from the Global Tuberculosis Institute to just say, why is this important? This is important because because stigma is a major problem with tuberculosis. And stigma is when someone is judged for having a disease or for thought to have a disease. And I'm sorry, I'm going to run away for just 1 second because I left my charger for my laptop upstairs. 1 sec.
Dear friends, I would like to remind, if you have any questions to our guest speaker, Brian Holler, please ask your questions or leave them in comments section under this publication. Thank you.
Hey, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but we cannot see you.
Oh, you're not missing out. 1 minute. So more information than people need, but I have a 2-week-old at home, so please bear with me as I'm trying to get my life in order here. 1 second, let me try and fix the camera real quick.
No problem.
Still no video, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can see you now. Yay.
Okay, yay. So thanks for bearing with me, everyone. So as I was stating, stigma is unfortunately something that's very closely tied to tuberculosis. So oftentimes people will think, someone has tuberculosis, or so they might be dirty, or they don't wash properly, or they might have HIV, speed, or they, their family is lower class. And the truth of the matter is that anybody can get tuberculosis, just like anyone can get a cold. It is not reflective of who someone is or their behaviors. But unfortunately, stigma prevents individuals from getting tested in time. So let's learn a little bit more about TB infection versus TB disease. So TB infection means TB is you have gotten TB, you've been exposed to tuberculosis. So you've breathed in that air, it's living in your body, but it's not making you sick. And actually, there are a large amount of people, especially doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, who have what's called a latent TB infection. And latent is just a fancy word that kind of means it's not making you sick at the time, and you can't give it to other people. But to have an active TB infection or active TB means the disease is staying in your lungs, is moving throughout your body. Usually you'll have some symptoms like cough, fever, and you'll be able to spread it to other people. And there are drugs for both active and latent TB, and USAID is supporting the National Tuberculosis Center in the Ministry of Health in helping them acquire drugs to fight these, both active and latent TB. So for treatment, it's not as bad as it once was. The drugs to fight TB have gotten much better, and it usually takes between 4 and 9 months. If your TB infection is not treated, it can turn into disease. And the most important thing is for people to take all of their medicine. Just like all antibiotics, if you don't take all of the medicine that's given, you may start to feel better, but you can still get other people sick. And common symptoms are just cough for 2 to 3 weeks or more, chest pains, fever, night sweats, feeling like really tired and run down, losing weight without trying, and no appetite. And then another concern is drug-resistant and multi-drug-resistant TB. And this is has occurred, this strain of the disease or this type of the disease, because people started taking the medicine, felt better, and stopped. So the drug learns to, so the disease learns to fight off the medicine, and then people have to take a stronger medicine that usually has worse side effects. So they feel sicker, they feel more tired. But the most important thing to remember about TB is that it is treatable now, and the drugs are much better than they used to be, and you can be completely cured in between that 4 months to even the worst kind of TB, usually 2 years. So in the Kyrgyz Republic, there's approximately 116 cases per 100,000 people. And unfortunately, 40% of them are drug resistant. And that's like a really high percentage. And there's a lot of reasons that Kyrgyzstan has a high rate of drug resistance because Kyrgyz people are very mobile. They travel internationally for work. And so maybe going to Russia or Turkey or another country, and it's hard to get the same tuberculosis drugs when you travel. Or some countries won't let people in if they think they have tuberculosis. So people will start drugs, stop taking them, start them again. And that creates these sort of nasty and more dangerous strains of tuberculosis. And about 500 people die each year of TB in Kyrgyzstan that we know about. And fortunately, the Ministry of Health has the National Tuberculosis Center, which is, or the National TB Program, NTP, which works really hard to fight tuberculosis and is one of USAID's major partners. So this is a lot of small text about USAID's work in tuberculosis here in the Kyrgyz Republic, but there's really two major programs. The first is the Cure TB project, which is $18.5 million spread out over 5 years to work really closely with the NTP to help train doctors and nurses about cutting edge medicines to help people fight tuberculosis. Number two, to help improve the health system. So making sure that people get diagnosed or get tested for tuberculosis more quickly, get the results more quickly, and get into treatment more quickly. Because if you think about it, every day or every week that someone has an active case of tuberculosis, they are putting other people at risk, their family members, their coworkers. So the more quickly someone can get diagnosed, tested, and treated with tuberculosis, the safer it makes it for everybody around them. And then also, we're working to help fight stigma. And we had already talked about stigma. Stigma is when people are judged for having a disease or for thought of having a disease. And what we really want to reinforce is, again, that tuberculosis is something that doesn't mean somebody's, dirty, you don't want to marry them, that, you don't want to work with them or go to school with them. Anyone can get it. So the best thing is to just get treated and get better, and to encourage people to do so. And we're also working really closely with the Red Crescent Society of Kyrgyzstan, helping train volunteers, doctors, and nurses, again, all throughout the country, and to help mobilize anti-stigma campaigns. And finally, to find individuals who may need a little bit more help to stay in treatment, to stay taking their drugs, and providing additional psychological or social support as necessary. So finally, how can you help fight tuberculosis? You can fight stigma. Honestly, if you hear people saying, "Oh, I hear they have TB, they're poor, they're dirty," that sort of thing, please explain, like, anyone can get TB. Don't judge. Tell people to get tested. If anyone has a cough for more than 2 weeks, they should get tested for TB. It's a really, really quick test. There's a couple different ways to do it, and you can get the results back really, really quickly. And it's free as well. And also, you can volunteer at a local health organization or an organization like the Red Crescent Society of Kyrgyzstan, who has thousands of volunteers all across the country, really working to help improve the health of Kyrgyzstani people, and engaging with international partners like USAID and WHO. So I agree with that. I can turn it back over to you with questions. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Please feel free to share any thoughts or questions you may have. Oh my gosh, I realized the second half I was not looking at the right camera. Apologies there. I'm sorry, I don't hear you.
Okay, sorry. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you, Brian, for this very informative presentation. We've learned a lot about the tuberculosis symptoms, early diagnosis, and USAID programs designed to assist Kyrgyzstan in implementation of the National Tuberculosis Program. Thank you. It was very useful. Dear friends, feel free to ask questions or leave your comments. I'll be happy to address them to our guest speaker. Brian, I have a question. Recently, local media reported that 15 soldiers were hospitalized with tuberculosis in Bishkek. Have you heard about that?
Yes, I have. And unfortunately, soldiers are more at risk for getting tuberculosis, because if you think about it, they live in cramped conditions in the barracks, and also, eat together, work together, play together, sleep in these closed areas, even are transported in marshrutkas or jeeps or tanks together. So they're more at risk. And, especially for the drug-resistant strains, I'm not certain if that was their diagnosis, if this was a drug-resistant case, but I would think so because these guys are pretty young, healthy, and some of the best of the best. So it would have to be a pretty nasty strain to infect that many.
Yeah, this is so sad. And we know that Kyrgyzstan is amongst the countries with the highest rate of tuberculosis. And was it always like that? Or what changes or what kind of improvements should be done in local health system?
Sure. Well, I would say, first off, the good news is that the Ministry of Health and the National Tuberculosis Program are working really hard to provide effective training to local doctors and nurses and health workers to help make sure that tests are done effectively, quickly, and people find out, quickly. The things that really make a big difference is making sure that test results get back to someone as soon as possible, which is much easier now with mobile phones. But previously, when someone would come in, get tested, maybe they don't get a phone call for a couple weeks. Maybe they've moved, or they've gone to school, or they've taken a job somewhere else, and then they're what's called lost to treatment. And that's one of the most dangerous things because they can expose other people, and the public health system can't track them down. So now the NTP has and CES, the state epidemiological organization, has a really strong team of what's known as contact tracers. And they're people who are kind of like detectives. Their whole job is to go and try and track down people who have tested positive or have been exposed, so been close to someone who tested positive, and encourage those people. So if anyone's looking for a really interesting career choice, maybe wants to be a detective, but doesn't want to mess with the crime, I would say that's an interesting line of work as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for
I'm sorry.
this.
And to address the historical issue. So I am not an expert in historical data around TB in Kyrgyzstan, but I know that there are, tuberculosis affects people worldwide. There's drug-resistant TB in the United States, in Europe, in Asia, in China, in Japan, everywhere. But sort of what makes Kyrgyzstan particularly susceptible is the information that I shared about people having to move very frequently. And so they stop taking their medications, or they don't have access to their medications. So that's why there's such a high percentage of drug-resistant TB in Kyrgyzstan. And there's also some thought around the legacy of the Soviet system as well that may have created that. But I think contemporarily, right now, it's mostly due to the fact that it's hard to get a month or a year's worth or 9 months of drugs and take it effectively. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Also, what would be your advice for people, for all of us? What should be, we know how to protect ourselves to reduce the COVID infection.
Mm-hmm.
And what should be done in everyday life to protect ourselves and our family members from tuberculosis, from infections,
Mm-hmm.
tuberculosis?
Sure. Well, the bad news is that, when I think life goes back to a more normal situation, it's kind of like catching a cold, where if you are exposed to it, or, the flu, grippe, if you're exposed to it in the air in a tight environment, then you are going to be at risk. Wearing masks when someone has active tuberculosis, or if they even think they might have active tuberculosis, is a really good idea. It never hurts to wear masks when you're in tight environments, again, like marshrutkas. And also, if someone, I think mask wearing has been proven to be really, really effective in preventing transmission of all airborne diseases, whether it's the common cold, COVID, or tuberculosis. But the most important thing someone can do, aside from mask wearing, if they think they have any symptoms of a cold or cough or they're not feeling well, is just to encourage people to get tested. And I can tell you, as an American who's worked in the American public health system, it is way easier to get tested for tuberculosis in Kyrgyzstan. You guys are doing a much better job of making tuberculosis testing accessible. So just going into your local health department or going and talking to your doctor, and they'll be able to get you tested quickly. So the sooner someone gets tested, if they're positive, the sooner they can get treated and return to normal life. And the last thing is just talk to your friends and family about tuberculosis and help clear up some of those misconceptions and stigmas around TB.
Yeah. Thank you. And let me check the comment section. We have some questions and comments from our viewers. Thank you, dear friends, for asking your questions. Here, the first question from Aida. Hello. Thank you for the presentation. It's a very significant topic to be discussed. Brian, are there any rapid tests to diagnose tuberculosis?
Sure. Well, there's really two major tests that are being used now, to my knowledge. And again, my background is epidemiology, not diagnostics. So please know that I know a lot about tuberculosis, but not the cutting edge testing stuff. But there's usually two ways that you test tuberculosis. The most common way is with a sputum test. And sputum is just a fancy word for sort of spit or phlegm. So somebody would cough and spit into a little cup, and then traditionally what would happen is they would put that in a culture in like a little plate, and they would try and see if there's any diseases. It would grow, and then they would be able to examine it with the microscope. Now in Kyrgyzstan, the NTP has really good technology called Gene Expert. They are these machines in which you can put the samples of sputum, and it will provide test results within a couple hours. So there are these rapid tests that are available, and the Ministry of Health is working to improve the supply chain or logistics chain. So when someone turns in a sputum test, they can get tested and the results back as soon as possible. So that these rapid tests are becoming only more accessible throughout Kyrgyzstan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we lost the last sentence. We missed.
Oh, can you hear me still?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. I just said that the Ministry of Health and NTP is working to make sure that people get their test results more quickly and people have their rapid tests run more quickly using these Gene Expert machines. So what used to take a couple weeks to find out now just takes a couple days to test and then confirm and find out. So, I mean, you can get back your results in as quickly as 24 hours, which is really surprising. Unfortunately, we still aren't where we are with HIV, where you can do a super rapid test, like a swab of the mouth or, a COVID test. But I think we'll be getting there sooner rather than later. The problem is that TB lives kind of deep in somebody's lungs. So it's a little bit harder to get that really useful testing material.
Yeah, thank you. We have more questions. Nurbolot is asking, is it dangerous after a couple of years smoke? Thanks, Nurbolot, for your question.
Sure. So as everybody knows now, smoking affects health in the short term and long term. If someone is a longtime smoker, has smoked for a couple years, they may be more likely to get active TB. So even though I've worked in hospitals and clinics, for most of my professional career, it's quite possible I've been exposed, but I've been less likely to get TB because I haven't smoked for many years. So it can make someone more likely to convert, and it can also make the symptoms way worse. So if you've ever been around smokers, they may often have a cough even when they are feeling healthy. It can make somebody's symptoms way worse if they get TB. And also, unfortunately, it can make someone who gets TB much more willing to die because their lungs aren't strong going into the disease.
Yeah, thank you. Here we have another question. Thank you for this presentation. How can we keep from spreading TB? You have already answered to this question. And why is TB still a big problem in Kyrgyzstan?
Sure. So thank you very much for the question. So again, the spreading of TB, the most important thing you can do is to get tested, and it never hurts to wear a mask when you're in cramped conditions. Or if you have a friend or family member who's coughing, it's not a bad idea to encourage them to wear a mask, just the same as you would with COVID now, because you're less likely to spread it if someone's wearing a mask. And why is it still a big problem? Unfortunately, it's a big problem all over the world. Part of our global community is, people traveling for business, for pleasure. So new strains of tuberculosis are constantly coming in to different countries, going out. So that's why, unfortunately, it's still a major issue in Kyrgyzstan. But better and stronger drugs are being developed that have less side effects, and it's something where we hopefully, once we eliminate active tuberculosis, we can really start making investments in latent tuberculosis, so treating people before they even have any symptoms or can spread it to someone else.
Yeah, this is good. These are good news. And we have here the very similar question to what you said. What are the latest medicine progress in treatment of TB?
Sure. So that's a really that's a really good question. So one of the first things, and again, I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm not a pharmacist, so I'm not a super expert. But one of the first things that happens when someone is diagnosed with TB is they get a drug resistance test. So their strain is tested against rampicillin, which is the easiest drug antibiotic to use to fight tuberculosis. And if someone has regular tuberculosis, what's called drug susceptible tuberculosis, it means that rampicillin and other basic antibiotics can be used to fight it. And that's actually the easiest treatment route. Then if someone has drug resistant or multi-drug resistant TB, that's when rampicillin will not work because the disease is really sneaky and it knows how to avoid that antibiotic. So there's new drugs coming out every day. There's two recently that have been released, bedaquiline, which is a cutting-edge new drug that is available now in the Kyrgyz Republic as well to help treat these more tricky and more difficult cases of drug resistance. So, scientists are, as more strains that are drug resistant come up, then scientists are constantly working to test new drugs such as bedaquiline, which has been really successful to address these new strains. But it's really a challenge because every time we think we have it under control, another one pops up.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I see here questions are very similar to each other, and so can you tell about stigma a little bit more? Because when we feel that someone treating us different and trying to avoid us and trying to split us.
Yeah.
What should we do? Where should we go? And with whom we should talk to?
Sure.
And they ask about asking for help. Yeah.
Sure. The most important thing someone can do is to talk to their friends and family about tuberculosis. Let them know it's not the big deal that it once was. Obviously it is a disease that needs to be taken care of, but it can be treated really easily now. What we've seen in Kyrgyzstan is sometimes people don't want to get testing. They do what's known as delay testing. So maybe I have a cough for 3 weeks. I'm not feeling well. I'm feeling very tired all the time. But I don't want to go to the doctor in my village because I don't want people to think I have tuberculosis, because there are these stereotypes about people with tuberculosis that, again, they're dirty, they're poor, they have HIV or other illnesses, and what we found is that none of these things are true. Anyone can get tuberculosis. So really making it so people feel comfortable going and seeing their doctor to get tested as soon as they think something might be wrong. And the other thing to do is to, like I stated, if you have the time and interest to volunteer in student organizations or with the Red Crescent Society, to really address this and become more educated on tuberculosis happens, or how tuberculosis is transmitted. But really, the reason that most people delay treatment or getting tested is because they don't want other people to find out. So the sooner people think, hey, tuberculosis is something anyone can get, I don't need to hide it, the better it will be.
Yeah, this is true. Thank you. We have here comments from Heidi. Heidi says, such an important topic, great initiative. Thank you, Heidi, for your comment.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. I don't see any questions or comments from the audience. It was very useful to learn about how are TB germs not spread, how to prevent new infections, stop the progression of the disease, as well as stigma. So thank you for sharing about the USAID programs with local agencies and other partners around the world to reach people with TB and help them with treatment. Dear friends, hope this session was helpful for you too. And this video will be available at Bishkek American Space's Facebook page and YouTube channel. Thank you, Brian, for joining us and for sharing this useful information. Yeah, it was really useful and helpful to learn all about tuberculosis.
Excellent. Thank you all so much, and thank you for your interest.
Yeah, thank you. Please take care and stay safe. Wish you to have a good day and good night here in Kyrgyzstan.
Пока.
До свидания. Thank you.